Welcome to TYT Sports, everybody. Francis and Jason here. The Clippers are 8-0, are about to rip off possibly a 9-game winning streak. They face the Heat tomorrow, or Wednesday, depending on when this clip goes up. And they've all done that without Blake Griffin, who in many advanced analytics put him in the top 10 NBA players according to player efficiency rating. His scoring was MVP caliber. He's got a jump shot. We know his athleticism. But that's not the point. The Clippers without Blake Griffin are on fire.
8-0.
They're climbing their way up into the top 3 in the Western Conference playoff seedings. I know it's a little bit early to talk about the Western Conference playoff seedings, but like when you look at the competition from top, Golden State Warriors, San Antonio Spurs, Oklahoma City Thunder, and LA Clippers, that's a great group of 4 teams right there. And the Clippers moving. The question here is, should the Clippers trade Blake Griffin?
That is the question.
Or, I mean, they're not just going to release him, too much money, but should they trade him? There's so much to look into for this. On the pros, they're winning without him. Right? And last year we saw the same thing. He got injured, missed about 10 games. Clippers were like 8-2, 9-1 in those games. They move better off the ball without Blake Griffin. Their three-point shooters are more open. Paul Pierce has been playing better. Dan's going to get more into that for us in a minute. And of course, the Chris Paul, DeAndre Jordan connection is just flawless.
Yeah.
Cons. Concentrating Blake Griffin, right? Can they beat the Warriors, the Spurs, the Thunder without a perennial scorer like Blake Griffin?
Physicality that he brings to it and driving to the hoop.
Thank you. Athleticism, some intangibles. His first 3 quarters of play, obviously we know what happens in the fourth. But speaking of, Dan, a season ticket Clipper holder, a diehard Clipper fan, tell us why the Clippers should or should not trade Blake Griffin.
Well, the argument for why should they trade Blake Griffin is that Blake Griffin is the worst fourth quarter player in the league. For players of his caliber. Like, if you're a superstar at that level, you got to be able to close at the end of the game. And Blake has shown time and time again that he is unable to close at the end of the game. In addition, Doc Rivers draws up plays for Blake specifically at the end of the game. So you have an offense that's totally built around a guy who you can't give the ball to in crunch time. And one of the reasons that they're having such a good run right now is because other players are forced to step up and take that last shot and close games. And they're making it, and they're closing out these games. Paul Pierce is a closer. J.J. Reddick's a closer. Jamal Crawford's a closer. Chris Paul's a closer. And they don't just dump the ball into Griffin. He gets double-teamed and then throws it away. So that's a huge reason why they're winning now. Obviously, some people are saying that the competition that they've played has not been those elite teams. So once they play them, they won't be able to beat them, which I think is the argument, as you mentioned before, against them trading him. The other thing I'd like to throw out is, if they trade him, what do they get back? That's something else a lot of people are saying who think they should not trade him, because how do you replace a guy of that caliber? I mean, you'd have to get a number 1 pick and plus a couple prospects, which for the Clippers might be okay because they don't really have enough of a future with the contracts that they have now. My personal opinion, I would rather them trade Blake Griffin than Chris Paul or DeAndre Jordan. It's more fun for me to watch them play, and they're a much easier team to root for without having to watch Blake crying for the entire game.
But Dan, does that not maybe come back to Doc Rivers and some of the I would say the responsibility has to be diverted towards him? Because you said yourself there he draws up plays in the fourth quarter. We've all seen it, specifically for Blake. But to trade him, would you not be there sacrificing some enormous plays from the first, second, and third quarter, and then you could potentially use his coaching ability to draft up plays specific for closers like Paul Pierce, who we've seen before with Washington close out games so well. You could potentially use him in the fourth quarter and sacrifice Blake for that, or even still have him on the court, but not as much as a prominent figure to close out your game. Could you not, therefore, rather than trade him, just look at Doc Rivers to make smarter decisions?
That's actually a really, really good point. And that's going to be the key to whether or not they really should trade this guy. When he comes back, is Doc going to be smart enough to have learned from what happened in the past 8 games and not just draw up the exact same plays that he was drawing up for the first part of the season? Last year when Blake came back, he didn't learn that. He still continued to do the same thing. So this time around, is he? But that is the best use of Blake. They should use him for the first 3 quarters, and then the fourth quarter use him as a decoy.
Of course.
Totally help the other players.
In the Clippers system, yes, the first 3 quarters. To answer the question of who he could be traded for, the Celtics. To me, it would be such a perfect fit because Brad Stevens runs a more in-transition game, and there's more. I want to say this, the pace that Blake can play at with the Celtics under Brad Stevens' system, where Brad Stevens wouldn't draw up closing plays for Blake, would be a fit. And there's so many great Celtics young players that the Clippers could totally use. Sorry, Ja'Cory, but Marcus Smart and Jared Sullinger and a first or second round pick. I know it seems like a super lopsided trade because Blake Griffin's an all-star and a top 10 MVP guy pretty much every year, at least according to the numbers. If you really watch the tape, it's not as imbalanced as you seem. They probably have to throw in somebody else to make it even, but it's not fantasy sports.
No.
It's real. So a Marcus Smart, a prospect in his nature, a great defender, a Jared Sullinger who can fit into that, to at least fill that 4, 3.5, 3-4 that Blake would play, especially in a small ball lineup with the rest of the Clippers, and a draft pick. I think would be a great deal for both teams going forward. To me, it's either you trade Blake, run the system through Chris Paul and DeAndre Jordan, because as you mentioned, Dan, and back to the idea of closing, real quick, is Chris Paul is so selfless, he'll always look to pass to a closer. DeAndre Jordan can't score except for dunks, and he's also a great rim protector, obviously, and keeps offensive possessions alive through his amazing rebounding. And they got J.J. Reddick, and they have Paul Pierce to finish that, as we already talked about. The other option is you keep Blake, and you get rid of Doc. You make him the GM, and then you can find a coach that can draw up the right plays at the end of the season, at the end of a game, and utilize Blake to his full ability. Because, again, to me, it's either a Blake problem or a Doc problem, but those two can't coexist.
And a good coach will always try and adjust to what your strengths are at the end. You have Paul Pierce. Give me him on the perimeter any game towards the end of the game. We've seen him close numerous times. Yes, he's getting on a bit, but it's still, you run your play and you utilize Blake Griffin as a decoy. Now, how many times have we seen great teams utilize their big players as a decoy when it comes to the final quarter? Blake Griffin is one of the players who is expected, specifically with how Doc Rivers has ran his offense in the fourth quarter numerous times. You use Blake Griffin as a decoy, try and find an open look for someone like Paul Pierce to take it, or a Jamal Crawford who you don't need to ask twice to take that shot. That, for me, makes a lot of sense, rather than trading possibly one of the best players in the league when you might be able to you might be sacrificing a lot when you could just try and adjust the way you run your play in the last quarter.
People also really like Blake. I mean, not that the public has.
It's not Blake's fault.
It's people. It's not like it has any effect on GMs and trades and stuff like that. And the likelihood of that Celtics trade happening is probably 0.0000001%. Because it's so ridiculously out there. It's very Bill Simmons-esque. I'll give my credit for that one. Thank you. But Dan, would you want Doc or Blake? You want Doc.
I think I would keep Doc. And I guess as a last thought, from Francis's point, you can't teach clutch. Guys, they're either clutch or they're not clutch. So, and for the Clippers, if they don't get past where they've gotten to the last couple of years, you can't just keep doing the same thing over and over again. Otherwise, you become the Cincinnati Bengals.
Oh, no.
Bangling.
Shots fired.
Are you saying the Clippers have bangled it with Blake Griffin?
I'm just saying Blake's middle name might be Vontaze.
Oh, my God. Blake Vontaze Griffin. Blake Marvin Lewis Griffin. You guys would fire Doc and hire Marvin Lewis. That's what would happen. All right. Well, thoughts in the comment section below. Find me a trade for Blake Griffin. If you are the GM, or if you're Doc Rivers, because you're technically the GM coach of the Lakers, the Clippers, whatever. If you're the GM coach of either team, of any team in the NBA, what are you looking for if you want to get Blake Griffin to come to your town?
Ben Simmons.
Well, to the number 1 overall pick, but they don't know that yet. You have to trade the 76ers, and guess where Blake Griffin's definitely not going? The Philadelphia 76ers. Comment below with what you think. We'll see you next time.